Hello and welcome back to Mindful Musings. Today I have Miss Eir with us. Miss Eir, do you want to go ahead and introduce yourself?
Hi, everybody. Thanks for having me, Ashley. I'm Eir Atla. I'm a medical astrologer, astro-herbalist, astro-nutritionist, and I help women heal their bodies, minds, and souls so they can overthrow the patriarchy.
That's what I'm talking about because let's get into you. You done overthrew as much as there is out there. Miss Eir comes from a cult. As much as we don't want to say that, it's very true. Do you want to go ahead and tell us what that was like being raised in a Baptist cult?
Well, it was a little bit crazy for multiple reasons.
I
Just for the actual cult aspect in itself. Um, but then my dad was one of the ministers, pastors, whatever you want to call them, within this cult. So I had a lot of expectations placed on me to be the example for the other kids to do the right thing and how to do all the things that we were supposed to be doing. And it was a lot. It was a lot.
Yeah.
And there was so much incongruity in my family as well because my dad was always talking from the pulpit about what a wonderful family we had and everything was so wonderful and we were such a great example, but at home my parents were fighting to the point they were throwing things at each other. My mom took off in the car one day dragging my dad down the street. There was all this stuff, but when we were at church, when we were at the around the people, everything was perfect. We were just the perfect example of a family, and it was exhausting to have to go and pretend that we were this happy family when at home there was bickering and fighting and screaming and actual abuse happening, but nobody cared because we looked good at church. So there was a lot of damaging stuff that occurred, let's say that.
Oh my gosh. You said your mom dragged your dad down the street?
Yeah, I was 10 or 11, I want to say, and my parents got in a really bad fight. I swear it was on a Sunday afternoon, but it might not have been. My brain is traumatized from this, so all the details aren't exactly clear. But I do remember that my siblings and I were doing the dishes because we were cleaning up after lunch. Mom and
Yeah.
dad got in a fight about something. I don't remember even what it was. My mom stormed out of the house, said she was leaving and never coming back because she was done with all of this. So she got in the car, and so my dad ran out after her, and she had the window down. Um, and he tried to jump in and grab her keys out, and she just started backing up and driving down the street, and my dad was still hanging out the window. I remember us kids had run out after my dad trying to convince, crying and tell my mom to come back, and then we saw that, and my dad finally jumped out and fell to the road, and then comes limping back, and we're screaming, we're hysterical, crying, and he's just oh, be quiet, it's not that bad. And I'm we just saw our parents try to kill each other, what do you mean it's not that bad? And
Like,
yeah, that was our home life, and people thought that when we were at church we were perfect and we were the wonderful example of how things should be, and I'm please don't follow our example.
oh my gosh. So at what age did that kind of image of perfect life really shatter for you where you started to sit outside and be like, but you're saying this and that doesn't match with what's actually happening? At what point were you aware of that?
I was probably somewhere between 7 and 8, um that
That's
I
so
really
young.
started noticing that my dad would say all this stuff at church, and he'd preach, and we were always using his family as examples for his sermons and stuff. And as he's saying it, and I'm sitting there, I'm that's not what happened. That's literally not how that scenario went at home. So why are we using that for an example? He was literally whitewashing our lives and making it look beautiful when it wasn't. It wasn't at all. Our life was the opposite of beautiful, honestly. And a lot of it too was because of how we were raised and in that religion too. It was just very much about looking good and not necessarily being good. As long as you
Yeah.
followed most of the rules and people didn't know what you were doing, it was fine, right? And there was a lot of abuse that went on in our household, physical and emotional, toward the children, especially because, oh, we're following the Bible. So there was a lot of physical abuse with, oh, we're just spanking you. But the spanking would be like your entire backside, you know what I mean, with the belt. Like, that's not, I don't think you should ever hit any of your children, period. But I really don't think if you're going to spank them that there's like, that's how it goes either, right? It's just,
Yeah.
it led me to be a
Like
completely
objects
different way
should
with my
not
kid.
be involved. Yeah,
Yeah.
like I'm pretty sure that you're not supposed to just grab something around your house and just like start spanking your children. Like, no, that's not the first solution. Like a bop on the hands to, like, okay. But that's like the last step. That's like, we've tried everything else. Talking is not working. Showing is not working. Like, but even then, we should not be using objects. I had the same type of childhood. The wooden spoon or the shoe, the flip flop was my aunt's favorite. So with that going on, what kinds of practices were a part of this cult that you were a part of, like growing up? Like, what were some of the practices that you had to partake in?
Well, it was church every Sunday morning, Sunday night, and Wednesday night for sure. And then throughout the summer, we would have week-long revivals. So we would be at church multiple times throughout the summer, all week long. Sunday, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, all the way through Saturday. Every night we'd be there for hours.
Oh, no.
So we weren't getting
near
enough rest as kids, which is, not good. Women and girls were expected to have long hair. I'm talking like down past your butt long hair. We had to wear clothing that covered us basically from neck to knee for sure, but they really preferred neck to ankles. But the men could wear whatever they wanted. It didn't matter. The girls in the church were expected that when they hit 18, you would find yourself a random suitable partner in the church, preferably, or one of the other neighboring churches that we associate it with, and just get married right away and start popping out babies. So barefoot and pregnant in the kitchen all the time was like the absolute expectation. Heaven forbid you wanted to do anything else with your life. Men were taught that they didn't have any control over themselves, their bodies, their bodily, functions when it came to like sex. So you had to dress the part so that you didn't make the men sin in the church because they couldn't help themselves. They were basically just, wild animals. And purity culture was a huge thing in there. So at 13, we all got purity rings and basically a talk from our parents that was don't have sex. But there was no like actual sex education about what to do if you did choose to have sex, right? Like, now what do we do? Like, no ways to talk about how to be safe during it, what consent was, nothing. My mom, basically the whole talk from my mom when I got my purity ring was don't have sex, but if you are going to have sex, you have to be married. And once you're married, you can't say no. And of course it was going to be a heterosexual marriage. There was no such thing as a, you liking the same gender or wanting to be with anybody who was not the opposite gender of you. And so there was that expectation that, heaven forbid, if your kid was anything but straight, there was going to be an issue. And sadly for them, I didn't turn out to be straight. So it was rough because I didn't want to date any boys. And they were like, why won't you date so-and-so? We think you should. They would try to push you together. It was expected that if your parents found a suitable match, that you would start dating them, whether you wanted to or not, kind of a thing. And basically we're like pushed into, I wouldn't say it was an officially arranged marriage, but it definitely was like, hey, if you don't do this, you're going to probably be disowned. So you kind of went along with things as a kid, especially because, that's a huge thing to not want to do, to like disappoint your parents and feel like they're going to kick you out of the house, because they would have. We had several people in our church whose 15, 16-year-olds at the time like had premarital sex or something, or wound up pregnant, or just decided that they liked, they told their parents, hey, I like Susie. And they're like, yeah, well, your name is Jennifer and you can't like Susie. And if you're going to, you got to leave. And they would just kick them out of the house. And my parents fully supported and stood by that. So I took that as they would do the same thing and never came out to them.
Yeah. That had to have been so hard. Because that's such a big part of your personality, you know, that's a part
Hmm.
of like finding out who you are, what you like, what you don't like, how you want your future to look. And yeah, I remember when we had talked prior, you had mentioned that there was like one of two professions or three professions that you could do as a woman, a part of this cult. What were those professions again?
Yeah, if you did decide not to immediately get married at 18, which was the expectation, but if for whatever reason you didn't find a partner or you wanted to find a partner outside of like the little bubble that we lived in, then you could go to college, but you could only go to college to be a teacher or a Sunday school teacher or a pastor's wife. Or if you were really lucky, you would get to be a secretary. So those were really like the only like three things, but some kind of teacher, a pastor's wife, or a secretary. And most of the girls in our church that went off to college, there was only a select handful of colleges that you could go to that were considered safe and okay and weren't going to push you toward the devil. And so if you went there, it was really under the expectation that I'm going for, I'm saying I'm going for a teacher degree, but I'm really going for my MRS degree, which is just finding a husband and getting married, right? It wasn't actually, they didn't actually care if you ever finished college.
Oh my gosh. But you took a different path and you said, well, that's not going to be what I do. At what age were you when you decided to stray off and you were like, you know what, this just is not for me, and, excommunicate me. I don't care. Doing my thing.
Right. It was probably 15, 16 when I really decided that I wanted to do something different because I needed to be able to support myself, and a teacher wasn't going to cut it because they just unfortunately in the US don't get paid a lot, and I was like I can't get out on my own with that. So I hit the books really hard in high school to get massively amazing grades and literally almost killed myself doing it because I was so like I was like I want to go into nursing, and to get into nursing you have to have good grades. Like you have to have A's across the board because there's a whole process to get into nursing school. It was a little more lenient back in the day than it is now, but not much. And in most colleges for nursing school, they only allow a certain number in. The max is usually 90 or 100 students. So you're competing against like 3,000 people that want to go into the program, and only 90 to 100 are going to make it. So I was like,
Oh
I
my
have got
gosh.
to crush high school. So I started
Yeah.
really crushing high school, and I came out with straight A's basically every semester for all 4 years, had myself a 4.0 GPA, and used that to leverage my way into nursing school. And the only reason my parents agreed that I could go to nursing school was because my mother had actually gone to college for an accounting degree and had gotten that accounting degree right around the same time she married my dad. And so she felt that it was okay for her girls to go and do something else because their expectation was that I would go and do this and I'd get it out of my system and I'd find a nice boy while I was there and I'd just get married and then I'd never use it. Because my mom, I think, used hers for maybe like 2 years, and then I was born and that was that, right? She was basically a stay at home parent after that. So
Yeah.
they just expected I would follow that same thing. So they were going to allow me to have a little bit of freedom, and it would show me how much I really needed to just get a husband and do my own thing. Well, the joke's on them because I did the exact opposite. I got into
Yeah.
nursing school. I got an accelerated program. I busted my ass in that thing. I don't think I slept for like 2 years straight, more than like 2 to 3 hours a night because I was just constantly going because I crammed 4 years of nursing school into two. And I don't recommend anybody do that, but it was my only ticket out of there, and I was willing to practically kill myself to get out. And so as soon as I graduated, I found a job that was almost 2 hours away from my parents, and I moved.
Hell yeah. And then when you moved and you were finally like that first moment out on your own and like the weeks following, what was that like? Like, because you had been with your parents, you had been with this cult, you had grown up one way, and it's vastly different out in the real world. What was that like to like launch yourself out into the unknown completely entirely?
Yeah, it was very overwhelming. We had grown up in a bubble to the point that, like, even for like prom and things like that. Like we didn't go to our high school proms. The churches in the area that we all associated with, they threw their own prom that we went to. So it was like a Christian prom. We went and associated with them for everything. We went to winter camp with these kids. We went to summer camp with these kids. So my entire existence was literally living within the bubble of this cult. And I don't think I had but like maybe one friend that was outside of it. That my parents were like okay with. Other than that, it was everybody was in the same belief system. And so when I got out of that and I'm in my own apartment and I'm, working with people that don't believe anything like me, and I'm actually working, like, because again, women weren't really allowed to work outside the home. So I had gotten a job outside the home when I was like 16, I think it was. I told my mom I wanted to get a job because I wanted to save up some money for things because we were always broke. They also believe in basically being like a pauper if you're going to be a pastor in that religion. They don't believe in like actually, doing anything. So we were very, 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 very poor growing up. And I was like, hey, this will save you guys some money because I'll be able to buy my own stuff. It was my manipulative way of getting myself a job. and my parents were like, okay. So I had a job at 16. I worked at Dairy Queen. And I used the money that I saved up working at Dairy Queen throughout the school year and then also over the summers. And then I ended up, after working at Dairy Queen for like a year, I moved to Arby's because it was a little bit closer. And with the bad winters that we had where we lived, it wasn't so much fun trying to get there in the winter. So I moved a little closer by going to Arby's. I saved up all that money, and at the end of it, I bought myself a car. It was just a beater, but it got me to school, it got me to college, it did all the stuff. So I had some experience of seeing some things outside of like thing, but not a lot because again, I'd go right back home to that same, insular little like community. So when I moved out completely and when I came home, it was just me, myself, and I in this apartment and there was no one else around. It was rough because there wasn't any coming back to like the reinforcement of, oh my God, you are probably being persecuted today because of your belief system at work. Oh, bless your heart, your poor little thing having to be out there in the world. And they made it sound like everything was so terrible. And I had never had that experience either. I was like, the people I work with are nice and they're kind and they're great. And none of them go to church at all, but they're like decent people. So I don't know what you're talking about, that everybody outside of us is horrible and awful. And, there was a narrative about anybody who didn't belong to that same cult. And so when I got out on my own, really, truly seeing that people can be 100% good and not have to be religious, like, blew my mind for the longest time because I just couldn't wrap my head around the fact that they didn't need a religion to just be decent people. And that really started, I'd already started separating around like 16 and really pulling back, not going to church as much, asking them to schedule me on Sundays so that I could avoid, services. So I'd already kind of started pulling away. But when I moved out on my own and just started being everywhere by myself and not having that reinforcement every time I went home, I started realizing that everything that I had been taught was bullshit. It was like literally bullshit. None of it was true. Nobody was out here trying to like stake me behind my back because I believed differently from them. Nobody was, persecuting me for it. No one at work was making fun of me for things. Like, I was like, these people are nice. Like, I love who I work with. I made so many friends that first year, but I will say it was really hard at the same time because I'm making friends with people that are around my age because a lot of new nurses started at the same time as me at that hospital that I worked at. So we all kind of started hanging out because we were all new nurses, right around the same age. And they were asking me things about, oh yeah, remember this, remember that, like when we were kids, or they'd be talking about like music they listened to, or they'd be playing music like, oh yeah, remember dancing to this song? And I was like, I've never even heard this song in my life. I don't even know what it is. Like, no, I haven't heard this song. And I felt and I still feel this way sometimes because I still feel like I haven't caught up on a ton of stuff, but I felt very like, I don't even know what I want to say. I didn't feel like we could really be that close of friends because I felt so insecure all the time, but I didn't have the same childhood as them. I didn't want anyone to know about my childhood. So I would just pretend that I knew what they were talking about a lot of times so that nobody would look at me different. But it was really hard because I felt so alone and on the outside,
Yeah. that I totally understand that, where you're like, I can't connect, but I also don't want to be the odd man out. Like, this is the first time that I'm starting to feel like a part of something that like is outside of everything I know. That had to have been so hard. That had to have been so hard. Did you feel, because you said you did want to share your childhood, did you feel like you had a lot of like shame around your childhood because it was so different? Or did you like carry that at all?
I think I did for a while, and it wasn't even like the shame of like the religious thing. It was literally the shame of the fact that like I didn't have any of these experiences. I didn't know the stuff these people knew. I didn't know any of these movies. We didn't have a TV in my house until I was like 12. We didn't go to a movie theater until the movie Babe came out in the theaters. About the pig. I mean, and that was like late 90s, I think that came out. So like I didn't have any of these like formative experiences. We didn't go to like sleepovers. You know, we didn't do any of this stuff. So I felt like I had missed out, and I wasn't ashamed about missing out on that stuff because some of it I'm like, I don't really care about. I was just more ashamed about talking about my childhood because people would start talking about how wonderful and loving their parents were, and I did not have that experience at all. And I felt a lot of shame around the fact that I was raised by such horribly emotionally and physically abusive people. And that's when it really hit me how bad it really was. Like when you grow up in that, you don't realize that it's terrible.
Yeah.
And so when people started
Yeah.
talking about their parents and how much they wanted to be around them and they couldn't wait to go see them on the weekends that they were off, and they were like, oh, what are you going to do? And I'm like, stay at home. And they're like, yeah, but you
Yeah.
haven't seen your parents in like months and months. And I'm like, I don't want to see my parents. Like, you don't
Yeah.
understand. I don't want to drive 2 hours home on my weekends off to go visit them. There's nothing there for me. The only thing there
Yeah.
is just more yelling and screaming and talking down to me and shaming me for things. And I just don't want to go
Yeah.
there. So I never went home to visit like everyone else was doing. And I felt more shame around that than anything else because I just started realizing that my childhood was not normal at all. Like, not even close.
Yeah. Yeah. And then that led you, because you were still so confused about it. Then you met your first husband, right? Shortly
Yep.
after
And
that.
that was a disaster. Let's just, because
Mhm.
growing up, there was no therapy. If you needed to talk to somebody about something, you were not going to a therapist. They would not take you. We barely went to doctors. In fact, I can't remember the last time I went to a doctor when I was with my parents. Like, I don't remember frequently seeing doctors. We went to herbalist, naturopath, whatever, and I don't mind that because that's, very much who I am now is that
Who you
alternative
are.
medicine,
Yeah.
and that's, and that wasn't a bother, but like, that was who they were. You're not going. And I remember that I had a really terrible experience, um, and I needed someone to talk to about it. So I asked about going to therapy, and
Mhm.
they literally signed me up to go talk to one of their pastor friends from one of the other church that we associate it with. And
Oh.
I was like, I don't want to talk to him. For one, what happened to me was violence against me by a male. I don't want to go talk to a male alone in a room. That sounds terrifying. And two,
Yeah.
I don't want to talk to this guy and tell him anything because he doesn't have any confidentiality, like anything, right? Like therapists do. And for how do I know? Everything I say, he's not going to run back and tell you, my parents.
That's
So
what I thought. Yeah.
I
Like,
didn't.
you just want
Yeah,
that so you know.
exactly. Like, I'm not doing this. So I just refused to go and I just dealt with it internally. So because of this experience growing up, I didn't know that you literally could just call and make an appointment to go to therapy. So I didn't have any therapy and work on this. I kind of did what I could on my own and kind of separated myself and
Yeah.
thought, oh, this is fine, right? It wasn't. So I met this guy, and
No.
again, I'm not straight, but I still was not dating a lot of women or anything at that time. It was still very
Yeah.
difficult for me to really step into that part of me and acknowledge it. So I did end up meeting this guy, tried to convince myself that everything was fine and he was a decent human being and I could do this. And I still had a little bit of I need to please my parents in there. So if I marry a man, they'll be really happy and I can still keep my family because I didn't want to be shunned and completely because my entire family, not just my parents, my entire family is all in this religion or adjacent religions, and they're all like this. So if I left, I was getting rid of everybody that I knew my entire life, cousins, aunts, uncles, everybody gone, and grandparents, and I was just didn't want that. So I was like, oh, I can do this. Well, it turned out I couldn't do it because he ended up being nastily abusive. On our wedding night, the abuse started, and it started with marital rape in the very first night, and it just got worse from there. And there was a lot of other things that happened that I won't talk about because it's tons of
She had
trigger
mentioned it.
warnings.
That's when it
But
happened.
let's just say that I had to leave because he
I
tried to
think
kill
your
my
Starlink is
dog,
acting up a little bit.
and it was not fun. It was awful. I spent a really long time trying to get away. And unfortunately, right as I had a plan to leave, I found out that I was pregnant and I was very sick. I did not do well during the pregnancy. It was very high risk. I had to be on bed rest and I couldn't leave because I didn't have anywhere to go where I could support myself because I couldn't work while I was pregnant.
Yeah.
So I wound up stuck until I had the baby. And then after she was born, I did end up making my escape, but she was about 2 by the time I was able to get the fuck away from him, and it took me over a year to divorce him because he didn't want to let go, and it was just, the whole thing was drawn out. But I do attribute me not going to therapy and feeling myself first from all my childhood stuff and me normalizing that because of how I grew up, that I wound up with a guy like that because I didn't know any different.
Yeah.
After I left him, I did go to therapy. I spent a good 5 years in therapy. Before I felt like I had maybe finally gotten to the point where I could trust that I could do things like on my own now and not make such bad decisions. But it took a lot of therapy. I mainly did CBT, cognitive behavioral therapy. That seemed to work the best for me. So I mainly did that. Just talking didn't do fuck all. So the CBT worked really well. So I mainly did that. And that really helped and got me back on the right path for sure.
Totally. Talk therapy can be good for some people. I don't diss on talk therapy, but at the same time, it can get out of hand with reminiscing and focusing so much on the this is happening every day instead of this is happening because that happened in my childhood, and it's created this entire habit, entire system that I've repeated over and over because it's all I know. Exactly like you said, it's all you knew. It was all you knew. So you were going to attract that into your life. You didn't know any better.
Oh, for sure.
Oh my gosh. And it reminds me, was this the same daughter that almost died and he slept?
Yes.
Through?
Yep.
Oh my gosh. Tell us about that. Tell us about that.
Yeah. So this is definitely the universe like trying to wake me up. I'll say that. I was 28 when I had my daughter, which if anybody follows astrology knows that is around the time that your Saturn return usually starts, depending on what degree it is in your chart. Mine is like at 3 degrees, so it started like right as I turned 28 when Saturn moved back into Scorpio. So I started my Saturn return like bam, right then. So I was in my Saturn return, I was pregnant, I was in an abusive relationship. My water breaks, so I go in, and 24 hours later, labor had never started. So they said, let's put you on a little tiny bit of Pitocin, and then that'll just kickstart labor. We'll do it for like 30 minutes just to get your uterus contracting, and once it starts on its own, then we'll turn it off. So I agreed reluctantly to that because I didn't really want a lot of medical interventions if we could avoid it, just because I had horrible experiences with doctors. After I had left my parents' house and started seeing doctors more, I had a bunch of horrible experiences with them and just wasn't really into let's just do every medical intervention known to man if it's not necessary, right? Because during birth they do a lot of unnecessary things because you're in a vulnerable position and they can get away with it. And being a nurse, I had seen a lot of crappy things happen to patients, and I was like, I'm not letting that happen to me, right? So I agreed to that because I was like, it's only going to be a short period of time. Fine. Well, they start the Pitocin, and about 5 seconds into it going, they had like a monitor around my belly, and it was like monitoring her heart rate and all that stuff. It starts alarming like crazy about 5 minutes into the Pitocin starting. So I ring the call bell, and the nurse comes in, and she's like looking at the screen, and I don't know a ton about babies because that's not my specialty in nursing, but I know enough from nursing school to know like where the heart rate should be, and her heart rate was not in there. It was way higher.
Yeah.
And I'm like, is that
Yeah.
accurate? She's like, oh, I don't know. We'll just like, let's reposition it because these outside ones are a little finicky, and they are. So if she kicks it or something, it can, if it gets moved, it can really not read correctly. So she moves it, the alarms go off, everything seems fine, the heart rate goes back down. She's like, oh yeah, see, it was just in the wrong position, blah, blah. She leaves. Well, about 5 minutes after she leaves, starts ringing again, and the heart rate is back up high. So this time, a whole bunch of people come in the room, and they want me to change positions. So I'm doing on my knees, on my hands and knees. I'm rocking back and forth. I'm turning over. I'm laying on one side. I'm laying on the other side. I was like a rotisserie chicken on a spit, just like constantly moving, trying to get like the right spot that everything would be fine. Well, it doesn't happen. The heart rate's still staying well over 200 and not coming down. So my midwife says, we want to put an internal monitor on. So I have to go up through your cervix and attach it to the baby's head because she was locked and loaded in the birth canal. So she was head down, good to go, but she just wasn't coming out. So I was like, okay, well, do we have to do that? And she's like, well, this one's not accurate. We need to make sure this is an accurate, heart rate, because if it is, then, that's not good. So at this point, then my heart rate's skyrocketing. So it was not a good situation anymore at that point. So I said, okay, go ahead and do it. That was one of the most painful things that's ever happened because I hadn't dilated at all. And the only way to get it in there was to manually dilate my cervix and then slide it through and attach it to her head. Mind you, the whole time this is all going on, my now ex-husband was sitting in the corner on his cell phone, completely ignoring any of this, not even participating, not asking any questions, not worried that all the alarms are going off. So I had no support. So this whole time I'm doing this all by myself. And so they get that monitor on, and the heart rate is now reading 251.
Oh my God!
And it's not coming down. Yeah.
Yeah.
And it's not coming down. Now my heart rate has reached about 180 to 190 because I'm getting stressed out because she's stressed out and they're all stressed out. The nurses in the room have a look about them that I know because I was a nurse that you don't have unless stuff isn't going in the right direction. And I'm like, oh great. So they leave it on for about 3 minutes, and they're like, it's not coming down. They put me on oxygen. They had me change positions again. They tried all this stuff. Nothing was happening. In fact, you're supposed to lay on your left side, right, because it opens everything up. Every time I laid on my left side, it got worse, not better. So they were like, okay, we don't know what's going on, but at this point, it's been almost 36 hours since your water broke. Nothing's progressing. Contractions even with the Pitocin never started, and she's in distress, and now you're in distress, so we have to take her. So we want to do an emergency C-section. Finally, my ex-husband hears that. He stands up and goes, she doesn't want a C-section. I'm like, oh, now you participate in the whole thing? And I'm like, I don't want a C-section, no, but I don't want my child to die or me to die with her, so yes, let's do this. So they roll me in, and because I worked there, this is actually the hospital I worked at, because I worked at the hospital, they usually for emergency C-sections, they give you general anesthesia, so you're completely knocked out and you have no idea what's going on. Because I worked there, the anesthesiologist came in and he goes, I'm giving you one chance to hold still and get an epidural so that you can be awake during this procedure. He's like, but if you move, if I don't get it, it's general and I don't care about your protest. I said, fair enough. So I have never held so still in my life. I was at that point then, labor had finally decided to start. So I was having all kinds of contractions, but they weren't normal. They're supposed to come in a wave from the top of your uterus down. Mine were coming from the bottom and up and in, and they were horribly painful, and I was like, he's like, you've got to hold still. If a contraction hits, you can't move because I don't want to paralyze you if it doesn't go where it's supposed to. Girl, I have never struggled through holding still so much in my life, but I did, and he got it. And the first try, and he's like, perfect. He put all the medicine in, let me lay down. They did all the stuff they had to do, and in comes the doctor, and they start the procedure. And I knew this doctor. My friend had actually had him as an OB. He was not mine. He was just who was on call that day. But I did know him, so I felt okay. But he was known as a jokester in that community, and everybody knew that he liked to make jokes. He was always ha-haing with the nurses, and I'd seen him around the hospital, and, we'd all joke, blah, blah, blah. Well, I know this about him, so he starts the procedure, and he does the first incision, and then he does the second incision, which gets you into the uterus, and as he's pulling all that apart so we can get the baby out, he's like, uh-oh. I said, what do you mean, uh-oh? You can't say uh-oh when I'm wide awake and I can hear you. Like, I said, are you kidding with me right now? And he's like, and I'm like, you better tell me. Like, please tell me. Please be honest with me. And he's like, you have a massive infection in your uterus. He's like, and I have got to get the baby out now. He's like, this is not good. And he snatched her out so fast they almost dislocated her shoulder. She was wedged into the birth canal and would not come out, so he was twisting and pulling, and she finally popped. Like, you could hear almost an audible pop when she came out. It was disgusting and, like, cool all at the same time. And so they got her out, and normally back then, skin to skin wasn't like a huge thing. It's become a much better thing now, and hospitals are actually doing it even if you had a C-section. But it wasn't a thing back then. But the doctor was like, hey, she needs to see her kid. So they actually brought her around and let me hold her. So I was holding her when all of a sudden I looked at the anesthesiologist and said, I don't feel well. And he said, what do you mean you don't feel well? And I said, I feel like the spinal's moving up. I can't breathe. I feel like I'm like struggling and gasping for air. And so they took the baby, and he's like, okay, well, let me just and he turned, and that was the last thing I remember. I left the building, literally. My soul went somewhere else. According to the chart, I was like legally dead for like 2 or 3 minutes. It wasn't a super long time. And so...
But that is a very long time outside of the earth realm.
Like in real life. Yeah, it is. But like, it wasn't a terribly long time in like human terms, right? 2 minutes is not a terribly long time, but it felt like it was forever to me from where I was. I woke up, when I opened my eyes, I was in like this, like it felt like a room, but I'm not really sure if it was, but it was just all white. And I just felt like a presence was there, but I couldn't put my finger on who the presence was. I knew it wasn't the Christian God, I can tell you that, because I never felt a relationship with the Christian God in the way that my parents raised us on how the Christian God operated. I just always felt really apart from that because he didn't feel like this loving deity like they claimed he was. And so I knew it wasn't him. But I knew it was something I didn't recognize, but I felt so loved, like true unconditional love for the first time in my life. Like someone was just holding me, and I did not want to leave because that was the first time in my life that I felt like someone liked me for me. And I was like, oh my God, I don't want to go. And then I heard a voice say, it's not your time, you have to go back. And I was like, no, I'm not going back. I'm staying here. This place is great. I don't know where it is. I don't really care where it is at this point, but I want to stay here. Like, it's awesome. And whoever you are great. And then they were like, no, you have to go back. And they're like, your daughter needs you. And I'm like, fuck that kid. Because I was just like, I don't want to go back. So I did, unfortunately, or fortunately, however you want to look at it, I did go back. And when I came to, and I was still in the OR, apparently I had hemorrhaged as well. My uterus wouldn't clamp down. So they were trying to get me to stop bleeding and all this other stuff. And when I kind of came to and I was still really out of it, I looked at the anesthesiologist and I said, I still don't feel well. And then I threw up all over him. Like, so much, because they had given me so many meds and my body was like massively reacting to them. And I was just vomiting everywhere, which the doctor was like, make her stop vomiting. I'm trying to like do this down here, and every time she vomits, it's pushing everything back out at me. So the anesthesiologist is covered in puke, and they're trying to get some meds that they can put in there to stop the vomiting. And I felt terrible later when I really had time to think about it, but at the moment I just didn't care. I just couldn't stop, and I felt like shit. So later we found out that this infection had been brewing for a very long time in my uterus. They ended up having to do a D&C to get me to stop bleeding, and the layer of infection was so thick on the wall of the uterus that they had to go so deep to get it all off that the doctor told me that they left probably more than likely permanent scar tissue all across the inside of my uterus, and there was no way I'd ever be able to have another baby because with the scar tissue, nothing could implant.
Yeah.
And I honestly wasn't upset by that. I was like, okay, like I'm alive, my baby's alive, like, you know. But I found that out at like my 6-week checkup. But
Shit.
they also said that because this infection was in there this whole time, that when they had cut into me, it released it. My body had encapsulated it, and so I was fine. I never had elevated white blood cells, never had a fever, never had any signs or symptoms of an infection in my body at all. My body had walled it off, encapsulated it, and was taking care of it. But when I went to go give birth and my water broke, my daughter was inhaling that infection for the 36 hours that I was, you know, waiting to have her either show up or this happened. And so they didn't know how sick she would be, but I basically, when they cut into me, it released all the infection into my bloodstream, and I went septic like super quick, and that's what happened. And what killed me was basically sepsis. They managed to reverse it pretty quickly because I was right there in the OR, and they were able to really get the stuff into me that they needed to. And honestly, hemorrhaging, I think, kind of helped a little bit. It got some of the infection out, but it was really scary. We didn't get into a room until probably almost like 7, 8 o'clock at night. So here I am. I've had an emergency C-section. I've died. I'm on massive amounts of antibiotics because of the infection. I had an epidural, so I can't feel anything from like the bottom of my chest down. And they're handing me a baby to take care of. And my ex-husband says, you know what, I'm really tired after this 36 hours. This has been really stressful. I'm going home to get some sleep. And he leaves me alone in the hospital. And he showed back up a week later when I got discharged. So I dealt with all this by myself.
Child, what?
Yeah.
What? Like,
not me, not his kid.
Your wife almost died. You're like, okay, well, you're alive. That Girl Scout, see you in a week when you're ready to come home.
Yeah. And I was like, I was livid. The nurses were livid. I have never seen nurses so mad. They come in, they go, where's your husband? I said, oh, he left. And they're like, he did what? And I'm like, they ended up calling him that first night, and they demanded that he come back. So he did end up coming back around like midnight that night, stayed until like early in the morning, and then left. So he did come back, but it was not for very long, and that was it. Then I never saw him again. But then the next day, the pediatrician comes in, and I said to him, because he was talking about what they were going to do, and he was checking out the baby, you know. And I said to him, are you going to draw a CBC? And he looks at me and he goes, why would I draw a CBC? And I was like, because of the massive infection that I had that actually killed me yesterday, and they brought me back. But she was inhaling that because once the amniotic fluid started coming out, it got inside. So she's breathing the amniotic fluid with the infection in it. I'm like, he's like, what infection? I said, you better go figure out what's going on. I said, because I am not happy right now. So he goes back out, and come to find out they never marked anything in her chart, just in mine. The pediatrician doesn't look at the adult chart. They're a baby doctor. Why would they be looking at, you know, the adult's charts?
Thing, right?
Yeah.
Jesus.
So he comes back and says, oh my God, you're right. We'll order one stat. So someone comes in, draws the blood. The doctor himself came back and told me that the levels were so bad that if we didn't start medicine now, like antibiotics right now, that she would probably not have made it through tomorrow. And I was like, well, thank God. Yeah, shit. Thank goddess I'm a nurse and I knew what to ask for, because if I hadn't been,
your baby would have died.
You know, yeah. So we finally get home about a week after I give birth. It was like a Monday that I gave birth, and we went home on like Friday, Saturday, somewhere in there. and had a really rough start after the birth. Really rough start. Had a rough start going home, like, because I just still couldn't walk hardly, couldn't do anything, just didn't feel well because I'd been on so many IV antibiotics. I had a massive yeast infection from my breasts all the way down to like my knees. So I was itchy and miserable and in pain and just like didn't feel well. And because I was breastfeeding, they wouldn't give me any narcotics. So I was just taking ibuprofen for the incision that I had because I had massive abdominal surgery right when I'm having a baby. So I was just like, and everything was leaking, and I was just miserable. And the baby's not latching correctly, and she wasn't doing well. So we spent all weekend at basically the walk-in urgent care at her pediatrician's office that they offered for the weekends, trying to come up with a plan to get her hydrated again and nursing correctly and all this stuff. So I was out of bed all weekend stuff. I was just exhausted. So the next week comes, things seem to be turning around. We followed what the doctor said. She was getting better. She was drinking. She was able to nurse better. So she was getting, nutrition. And I was like, okay, like we're good. We've made it through the hump. And then she turned 2 weeks old. And it was the middle of the night, probably like 1 or 2 a.m. I sat up straight out of bed in the middle of the night and I said, something's wrong with the baby. And I smacked my now ex-husband awake and I was like, hey, something's wrong with the baby. And I turned on the bedside light and she was in the bassinet next to the bed and she was blue and not breathing. And not making any noise. So I don't know what woke me up outside of my intuition, but let me tell you, my spiritual awakening happened during this time, which is what that near-death experience really was. So that got me started on that path. So I already hadn't been really believing in the religion that I grew up in, but now I really wasn't. And then now my child is like dying in front of me. And out of reflex, I was like, made a prayer to God because it was a reflex action. I didn't even think about it. It just happened. And as I'm thankfully a nurse and had all this, CPR and ALS and all ACLS, all this stuff, I was like, oh my God, I at least know what to do. So I'm trying to clear her airway because I could hear that something was stuck there and she was gasping. And I was trying to clear her airway and I'm yelling at my ex to call 911. He sits up on one arm, tells me I'm a nurse and I got this, and rolled back over and went back to bed. So at this point, I'm really freaking out. I managed to kick my nurse brain into gear and turn the mom brain, who was freaking out, off, and remembered that I was like, she needs suction. I'm like, I have a suction thing across the hall in the nursery. So I raced across the hall carrying my lifeless baby with me, and I get the tube down in her throat and I start suctioning, and she finally goes, and then I finally went, and didn't realize that I hadn't been breathing either, and then called 911 myself. And that right there killed any belief that I still had in a deity, because I was like, I did that. I saved her myself. I'm not giving anybody else this credit. Like, it wasn't them. It wasn't because of any of that. And that just put me on the path to where I am now. But it really was, the starting point was her almost dying in my arms.
And you guys have talked about this to this day. You guys have talked about your near-death experiences, and you've kind of dissected that a little bit. And you guys don't push, you said, religion in your house at all. You let the kids kind of, be able to observe you and your practices now, which is paganism, right? Is what you and your husband practice, and then they kind of just have the open minds to explore whatever they choose, but happen to kind of follow your path as well because they feel comfortable with that, right?
Most of them have, yeah. There's some that we have a couple adult kids and we have a couple of teenagers now, and our adult daughter has definitely kind of really followed that whole like witchcraft path and paganism that I've kind of followed. Our adult son is, I wouldn't say he's like an atheist, but he definitely isn't like as pagan minded as we are and stuff, so I don't really know where he falls 100%. Again, we don't really talk about it a lot because it's not important and it doesn't change anything, but I do know he's like, I'm never going to church. So I'm like, that's fine. Our youngest daughter does kind of follow more my path too, because she's been watching us for so long growing up like that. So she definitely follows more that. And then our youngest son is kind of still ambivalent about a lot of stuff, but he's just turning 13 at the end of this month, so he has plenty of time. The kids have asked occasionally because like friends have that they've made have been like, hey, we want you to come to our church. So they have a few times gone to different types of churches, like a Catholic ceremony, I think at one point. And one of them went to like a, I think it was non-denominational. I don't remember for sure. It has been a while ago. They tried. They came home and they were like, "Oh my God, that was the most boring thing ever," and it was mean. They were mean. They kept saying that we were born as evil people, and we're not. Like, I'm not a bad person. I don't want to go back there. We were like, "Okay, you don't have to go if you don't want to," and so they never really did. And they've kind of just found their own paths, which is what we want for them, right? Find what works for them. And if that does turn out to be, hey, I want to go and join a Christian church of whatever, denomination, that's fine. But I want it to be because they've chosen it, not because it's been forced upon them like I was.
And that's so beautiful that you're like, okay, you want to go and explore that? Go ahead. Like, you have my full support. I'm here when you've got questions, you know. But I think that that's really beautiful. That's not something that a lot of individuals, and even into parenthood, they don't do that. It's, this is what we're doing. This is how we're raising you. And then I think that that's when kids really rebel, because they aren't able to ask questions. They aren't able to, explore their own questions that they have, and based off of their experiences and what they're observing. And I think that that's a really beautiful thing that you have done for your family. And I just really want to throw that out there. That's really beautiful. I know that would have changed my life as a kid, because I too grew up in a very culty,
Yes.
Christian Assemblies of God church for the first freaking 15 years of my life. So very much understand that. And what kind of, last question, right? What really got you into paganism after growing up in the way that you did, and kind of being atheist? Like, what got you on that path?
I think all of us who have left religion all seem to follow a similar path in the fact that, like, first we're completely atheist and we don't believe in anything or any deity or nothing like that. It's just completely no, 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 because we're just so burned out by it all. Yeah, that we're like, no. So I was that for a very long time. When I left home and was like on my own after nursing school, I basically would have told you I was an atheist and I didn't believe in anything or anybody, no higher power, no nothing. We're just here for, whatever reason. And then about a couple, 3, 4 maybe years of really following that path, it just didn't feel right to me anymore. Like, it felt like there was definitely something more, but it wasn't the Christian God in my mind. Like, I didn't feel like it was the Christian God, but I didn't know what it was. So that kind of started me down the pathway to, like, okay, well, what else is out there? Like, what other kind of, like, religions or beliefs exist? Because, to be fair, the only ones I had ever learned about growing up were the ones that my parents called cults, which were like the Jehovah's Witness, the Mormons, the Catholic Church. They were all cults to my parents. And, like, I legit remember my dad doing a whole sermon series on how to determine what was a cult and what wasn't, and everything that he listed that was like, this points toward a cult, I sat there in the service going, that's us, that's us, that's us, that's us. I'm like, wait a minute. So when we got home, I said to my dad, I said, well, we fit all that criteria of a cult, so are we a cult? And he's like, no, we're the one true religion. We're not a cult. And I was like, but we fit all this stuff that you said. And he was like, they were trying to, like, make me understand that I was wrong in that. And I was like, but I'm not wrong. Everything you said, we do. So that was very confusing too. And that's kind of where I started, like, veering away. I still went to church because I had to, because I lived at home still. But, like, I definitely didn't believe anymore, because I was like, well, okay, you guys can never answer my questions. But so I started believing, like, there has to be something else out there. I just felt like that. So then I would say I kind of hit the agnostic section for a little bit. While I was kind of exploring, I did try a non-denominational church. I thought, hey, maybe that'll be better. I lasted, I think, like 2 services, and I was like, this is just cult light. It's not what what I was raised to believe is if you went to these non-denominational churches that had the Christian music and the bands and stuff, that it was like literally the devil. It definitely wasn't that, but it also just felt still like the church I grew up in, but it was just like the light version. And so that didn't feel right. So I kind of started like, okay, what else is out there? So I started, like, Googling things, and I did eventually stumble across like someone talking about like Wicca, and I was like, okay, well that makes a little more sense to me and it feels a little bit better. So I think I read like one book on like what it was and whatever. But when I got to the part where it was like they have an actual book of rules that you have to follow, I was like, oh, that doesn't feel right either, because my whole life was run by rules of somebody else and not things that felt true to me. It was just literally doing what someone else said. I was like, I don't want to get back into that, but now I'm a Wiccan instead. I was like, that doesn't feel right to me. And if it works for other people, that's great, but it just definitely didn't resonate with me. So I was like, okay, well, I don't want that. But then I was like, okay, well, what about witchcraft? Like, it's like Wicca, but not. And you don't have like a book of rules that you have to follow or a set of like instructions that, you kind of can do your own thing. So I started kind of just doing my own like witchcraft type thing and researching more about like the quote unquote types of witchcraft, and kind of settled on green witchcraft was more like my thing, because I work with a lot of herbs and things like that, and I like healing people. And so I had actually, after my daughter was born, gone back to school and got a degree in herbalism. So I just was like, oh, this all matches together and this works. So I was that for a really long time, just like a green witch. And I was using those skills to really create like herbal things to help people, and doing consultations and combining that with like what I knew as a nurse. And it was great. And I loved it. But it still felt like I was missing a piece of something. And at this point, I then met my now husband. And he was raised like a Norse pagan. And so we started really like talking and getting to know each other. And I was like, what is that? Like, I don't even know. And never heard of it, obviously, like it wasn't in my childhood growing up. And so he starts like explaining it to me and going through the things. And I'm like, and I was like, oh, that resonates. Like, that really resonates. And so I started down the road of like learning that. And so now I'm more of like a Norse pagan green witch, so a little eclectic there. So I do all that. And while I was exploring like what is Norse paganism and does this resonate with me and do I want to do this, while I was like still kind of figuring it out, I had a visit from, now I know it was Hel, which is, or Hela, sometimes she's named in the, in the mythology, but she came to me. She's the goddess of the underworld of Helheim. And she just like showed up one day, like smack dab in front of me, and was like, hey, I'm here. And I was like, who are you? And introduced herself and explained that it was her that was in that room with me when I had my near death experience, and she was the one who had been there, and she was the one who told me I had to go back. And I was like, so I said to her, I said, why'd you tell me I had to go back? Like, I really wanted to stay there. What are you doing? And she was like, I told you then, and I'm telling you now, it wasn't your time. You're here for a very specific purpose. You haven't completed it yet. You're not leaving. Like, you're just gonna have to do what you're supposed to do. And I was like, okay, well, what is that purpose? And she's like, you're here to help heal the women of the world, as many as you can, and get them back onto the path that we used to be on, and do all this stuff. So she had like a whole thing she laid out for me. And then like literally a few weeks later, Freya showed up and she's like, hey, so by the way, we totally are happy that you're going down the path you should be, but you're doing it under the wrong name. And I was like, what? This is my name. It's been my name since birth. What are you talking about? And she's like, yeah, no, you have to go by your actual name and who you really are. And I was like, okay, well, what's that? Like, this is my actual name. And she's like, no. So then she gave me my name and was like, here you go, this is your name, and this is what you're going by, and this is who you are and what you're going to do. And I was like, oh, okay. So I changed my name because that's what they wanted. And I know that sounds crazy to people who maybe don't follow this, but like it felt right. And I was like, okay. So, changed my name. And then as soon as I did that, like things blew up in my business. Like things just started getting better and better. Like people were coming out of the woodwork. People were finding me that I didn't even know how, and I was like, oh, okay, I guess I'm glad I changed my name. But now I'm a little overwhelmed because we went from, this to now this, and I'm like really like not prepared. I didn't feel like, but I've noticed that Hell doesn't care if you're prepared. She cares that you're doing what you're supposed to do, and she will push you until you do it. She is not one to beat around the bush. So when she calls, I listen, and off we go into a new adventure together and figure it out along the way. So that's kind of how I wound up here, and yeah, it's been much better. I feel like myself, like I've come back into myself, like nature is my church and I spend a ton of time in it. And I, you know, I don't know. I feel like this is it for me. Like I found it. I don't need to find anything else. I'm not searching anymore for anything. It feels like I'm whole again, if that makes sense. Like I felt like there was a piece missing and now there's not.
Yeah, and that's what matters is that it feels good to you. It doesn't matter what anybody else says. If it feels good to you and it feels aligned to you, like that's it. That's what your life is about. It's you to create and express how you want and practice how you want. And I mean, to think that you grew up in this cult and now you found it's so far from the spectrum of where you started. Your
Oh
whole
yeah.
adventure, your whole adventure. And then for her to be like, well, yeah, dude, I was there this whole time. Like, what, you thought you woke up on your own? No. Well, like that. I think and I know that there's got to be other people out there that have gone on this experience but feel crazy and then they don't know what to do. They don't know. So I'm really glad that you're here and you're expressing this story and holy shit, dude. Your story is so unique and it's so beautiful and so powerful. It shows how much power a woman truly does have when they're on their own. Like, you are capable if you believe that you are. And you knew that you
Mm-hmm.
were, even when all the odds were stacked against you. I think that's beautiful. So if you could leave, hi buddy. Oh, now my dogs are up. um, if you could leave the audience with one message out of this entire story, what would it be?
To listen to that intuition. They tried to literally beat my intuition out of me and told me it was of the devil. And so it took me a really long time after I left to really listen and trust it, which is why I married the person that I did the first time, because my intuition was literally screaming not to do it, and I was told that inner voice was the devil, and they were steering me wrong, and so I didn't listen to it, and it got me into a whole heap of trouble. So if you ever have like a gut feeling or like just an uneasy feeling in your body, that's usually your intuition telling you that, hey, you're not supposed to be doing this, you're on the wrong path, and to actually fully listen and trust that. Even if it makes no logical sense, especially if it makes no logical sense, actually, let's put it that way. If it makes no logical sense why this is coming up, or why you're suddenly anxious, or why you're having this weird sensation in your body, or why you have this sudden desire to go do the exact opposite of what you're doing, that's more than likely your intuition. It is time to listen to it and just fucking go do it, because it's not going to steer you wrong, and it will definitely keep you a lot safer than I let myself be when I didn't listen to it. Now I listen to it all the time. My husband has definitely decided that listening to it is the right piece of advice, because there was a couple of times when he kind of overrode that when we first got together and was like, oh no, we should do X, Y, and Z, and I was like, yeah, I don't feel like we should do that. My intuition is screaming we should do something else. And he really pushed, and I was like, okay. So we did it, and then it all went exactly how I said it was going to, and he was like, okay. So now even he listens, because he knows that it's right. So listen to your intuition. It won't steer you wrong, and even if it makes no sense, it's it's what you got to do. It's what I followed to find where I am now and what I'm doing and who I am, and it literally has changed my entire life. And if I had been taught this from a young age, oh my God, that would have been so much better. Instead of being taught that I didn't know
Before you,
anything, I didn't have that inner knowing was wrong, you know?
yeah, man, thank you so much for spending so much time today and telling us your beautiful story. It truly is an entire adventure, and you're not even halfway done, dude. Like, that's what blows my mind is you still have so much more to go. I
Right?
I'm so glad you're here. Thank you so much for your time today. It's been such a pleasure having you here and hearing, I mean, not one but two near death experiences. Holy crap. And the fact that you were like, Mom, brain, click. I hope I never have to experience that.
Yeah, I do not wish that on any parent whatsoever. And if you do have to go through something like that, I wish you have all the support in the world while it's happening, because doing it by yourself fucking sucks. And
Yeah.
when it's all on you, if you make a mistake, and that didn't turn out the way it did for me and it went the other direction, I don't know if I ever would have been able to like get over the guilt of that because I was the only one there making decisions because my ex was utterly useless, and that would have been devastating. And so I do not wish that on anybody at all.
Good riddance for that man. Good riddance.
Yes.
Bye-bye. And now we've got an amazing hubby, best friend, and you got all these bonus kids, which is so cool. I love that you have bonus kids. I love it.
Yes, I am so glad too because I always wanted at least one more. Like I never wanted kids really to begin with, but since I had one, I was like, okay, well, since I have one, I'll just have one more, and then they'll have friends and whatever. Because my sister and I were like super besties growing up, so I really wanted that for her. And then they told me I couldn't have any more, and I was just like, okay, well, it is what it is. But when my husband showed up in my life and he brought 3 bonus kids, I was like, hell yeah. So I get the kids. I don't have to go through pregnancy or birth again. Sign me up.
One near death ever again.
Right? And it's been fabulous. I love my bonus kids. We all get along great. I am definitely not a mom to them, but I am, like a bonus figure mom that they love having and someone to talk to who's not biologically their parent because I don't feel the same attachment as like their parents do, right? So they can come to me for like advice and know that it's going to be like good advice because it's not skewed by being their mom for realsies.
Yeah.
So it's lovely. I love my kids.
Cool aunt. You're the cool aunt that they
basically. Yeah.
Yeah. But not obviously aunt.
Yes.
So one of the last things I want to ask before we jump off here is the services. Do you want to talk about the services that you offer? And maybe we can throw some links in there for anybody that's interested to kind of follow up with you and what you do.
Yeah. So as I mentioned at the beginning, I'm a medical astrologer, so I mainly do medical astrology in how I work with my clients. So medical astrology is a branch of like quote unquote traditional astrology and focuses more on how the planets affect our physical bodies, our spiritual bodies, our emotional bodies, and our energetic bodies. And so when you look at someone's birth chart, depending on which sign those planets are in, shows where their influence is being exerted in the body, and then we can use that to find all kinds of different things out, and where all kinds of things. I can find nutritional deficits. It's amazing. I love it. It's really like my tool that I use to like look inside your body without having to actually poke and prod you, which most people love because as women, especially, we've been poked and prodded a lot over our lives when we see doctors and are always told nothing is wrong, basically, and you just got to lose weight or you're too anxious. And this literally gets to the actual root cause, shows what's really going on, and we can fix it. And I've had I mainly work with women. I do men readings and stuff and help with them if they get referred to me from a client that I've worked with in the past, but I don't seek out working with men. There's a lot of reasons behind that, but let's just suffice it to say I don't always feel comfortable with that, so I don't do a lot of those. So I work mainly with women, but I've had so many times where we have found the true root cause, and when we have fixed that, then all of the symptoms, all of the physical symptoms, all of the spiritual symptoms, everything has disappeared, and women are healing left and right, and it's great. So I offer multiple different kinds of readings where you can just like a one-off reading and take the information and run with it and kind of do your own thing. If you're someone who's prefer that you have someone who's there to like kind of help you a little bit more, hold your hand along the way, give you some guidance, some support, and knock some sense into you when you are, taking steps backwards when you should be going forward, then I offer one-to-one services. We can work together for 3, 6, 9, or 12 months, whatever works for you and what you really need. I do find that most people that I work with, if it's not something that's a very chronic issue, it's more of an acute issue or hasn't been happening for too long, 3 months is usually enough, and we get you all feeling better. And my goal is to empower you to take your own health into your own hands and to heal yourself. I'm not doing the healing. I'm giving you the tools and the empowerment to do that. most of my one-to-one clients at the end always say that I just felt so empowered to do this on my own and not feel like I was just once again being told what to do by somebody else. So you get to, you fully step back into your power and your intuition and trust in your body and get back into your body, because so many of us for so long have dissociated from our bodies because it's easier than being in pain all the time, or not feeling well, or dealing with crappy periods, or horrible menopause, or not being able to get pregnant when we want to, or whatever the reason is, right? It's easier to dissociate. And so we're returning to your body, returning to your inner knowing, returning to your power, and then you heal yourself. So that is really a great way to work with me as well. I have a few courses for things that are on my website. One is called Astro-Aligned Kitchen. It's how to eat for your body type based on your cosmic blueprint, and how your body is designed to actually intake food, how your tastes are, how you like your food prepared, how your digestion actually works or sometimes doesn't, and how to fix that, and then how to set up your kitchen so you can always just nourish your body in a way that works best for you. It's not a diet. I don't believe in diets or diet culture. They can all fuck off. But it very much is very individualized at how your body would do better. I've been eating that way for years now, and it has made a huge difference in my life. And then I have one called Happy Healthy Hormones via the Cosmos, and this explains all about how our hormones are governed by which planets and how to balance those out using nutrition and herbs and spiritual practices to get your body back into sync with the moon, as we should be, and then how to heal any hormonal issues that you're having, mainly revolving around periods and menstrual cycles, but it could be hormones for other things as well. So those 2 courses are up. I have a few books that I've written that are on my site. So lots of ways to work with me, but you can find all of that at atlaastrology.com/everything, where everything is listed of what I offer.
Yes, yeah, and we'll put the link in the comment too. So we'll put the link available, so you guys can do a one-stop shop type thing. Thank you again for such a beautiful, beautiful time together. I would love to have you back. You're just such a delight to have on here, and you're such an amazing storyteller too. Let me tell you that, because like I get
It's
really
the
wrapped
Leo
up
rising.
into your stories. I did when we met, and I'm doing it now where I'm like, oh my gosh, it's as if I'm hearing it for the first time again, even though I already heard the story. Amazing. I really love your time here on the podcast. Thank you again for everything, Eir. I really appreciate you.
Yes, thank you for having me.
Yes. All right, guys. And as always, I love you. Ta-ta.